Hello everyone, Lawrence here from Unicorn Bikes, and if you remember correctly, I actually said I wasn't going to review this bike because this is not only my first downhill bike, it's also the only downhill bike I've ever ridden. So in this video, I'm not going to review it per se. I don't really know how it compares to other bikes when it comes to pure performance numbers, but I am going to talk about this bike specifically, what I like about it, what I don't like about it after, I guess, half a season of riding bike parks. Despite, all the stuff going on in the world, I did ride this bike quite a bit. So I'm going to go over each part of the bike in detail instead of saying, yeah, I was hitting these drops at this speed compared to this other bike. So it's going to be more of a technical look at it, not from a feel sort of standpoint, but I will talk a little bit about the riding experience as well. So like with any bike, the most important bit is the frame, and this is the Gambler in aluminium. This is the 920, which is in this lovely raw but polished and then kind of clear coated aluminium, so it doesn't leave marks or fingerprints. It's pretty easy to clean, but it does have that raw aluminium look, and I absolutely love it. Even after a lot of riding and quite a bit of crashing, it still looks good. And that's the main thing with a bike like this. It's a bottom end bike. You're gonna break stuff, you're gonna wear stuff out, and then you can replace it with nicer parts afterwards. But the frame itself is the basic starting point. Now, what I love about this frame is that every single bolt is a T27. So anything from the linkage to the shock trunnion mount to the rear seat stays, the chain stays, everything is easily accessible and is a T27, except for the main pivot bolt right here behind the chain guide. That is a little bit harder to get to, but it too is a T27. So you can do pretty much all your bolt checks with a single Torx key, which is great. What's also great about this bike is the adjustability. So the main thing you'll notice, which is a funny one, is maybe this sticker on here. This is because this is a lease bike that I got from my job. So this is like a company bike for me, which I guess makes me somewhat of a pro downhiller, I don't know. Talking about the flip chip in here. So you have a low bottom bracket setting, a high bottom bracket setting. Again, T27 to adjust this. It's a single bolt, flip the chip around, flip the chip on the other side and change whether or not you want a low BB or a high BB. I noticed that the low bottom bracket is what I tend to go with because, well, it's a downhill bike, you're not pedaling all that much. And so I wasn't pedal striking even in the low setting, even though in rock gardens it can be a little bit tricky sometimes and you have to be a bit more precise with where you put your pedals. But I found the low bottom bracket setting to be perfectly adequate. I wouldn't want it any lower, but I also don't really want it any higher. Now, the first thing you may notice here is this brake hose is right in front of the flip chip. But while this is a little bit annoying sometimes, this is not something you adjust a lot. Let's show you some adjustment flip chip that actually is a lot more annoying with the hose. So we're now at the back end of the bike. Again, there's two geometry settings, a shorter and a longer chainstay or rear center length. I have mine in the longest setting because it just makes it so much easier to ride bike parks. As you can see, I did crash it. It scratched up a little bit, but it's not too bad, even though it did destroy my rotor and I upgraded. As I said, you break parts, you upgrade them. So I upgraded to a Shimano XT I-Stack rotor. As you move your axle backwards and forwards, you also have to move your brake point mount. So this does not move with it automatically. You first set the brake or the axle and then you set the brake in whatever order you want to do it in, but you do have to adjust the caliper when you adjust the axle. It's not on the same sort of mount that slides all together. This uses a 5mm on the drive side, and the way it works is there's a nut. So this is an 8mm nut, and you just undo it like so. Now, as you undo this nut, you can see it really is just a little nut. And you can put it in here or in here. The main thing is this is a loose bit and I do not like small loose items. The next thing you may notice is the axle is still in here. So let's show you how you actually take the axle out. So with the little nut off, you can actually access the axle itself. Again, there's a flip chip in here and you can flip this around to go shorter or longer. This actually does use the 5mm, but as you can see, the axle hole is right in front of this derailleur cable, and I did not cut this down. This is the way it came from the bike shop. But you can't rotate this because it's keyed so that it fits in here. You actually have to go around, reach around, and push the axle out from the other side. But then as you're trying to pull the axle out, you're hitting the cable, which is a bit annoying. It's a small detail. I wish Scott did it slightly differently because it just makes it a little bit tricky to get it in or out. Also, again, you have to make sure it's rotated correctly or you can't push it in all the way. It's a little bit of a gripe that I have, and there is some room for improvement in this adjustable chainstay length system of the way they're doing it. One of the things you won't really be changing right away as you buy the bike is the suspension. So let's have a little look at that. This is a Fox Van RC. RC meaning you have compression and rebound. Compression easily, toollessly adjustable, just like that. Works right away, very easy. The compression dial though, the rebound dial, I'm sorry, is all the way hidden in the bottom. Let's see if I can show you where they hide that little thing. But you can see a tiny little red ring here, if you look very carefully. Tiny little red thing, hard to access again because frame's in the way, but this is kind of the same with most Fox coil shocks. The rebound is hidden all the way there. As you can maybe read right now, if I move the focus, this is a 500-pound spring. On a size large frame. I would like a 550, I think, for my weight and my riding style, and it would be nice if you could choose which spring rate you get when you order the bike. I had to wait over 3 months to get this bike, so it wouldn't be too hard to choose the custom spring rate when you order one. So maybe that's something Scott can improve on. And now we are talking about suspension, we might also mention the fork. So this is a Fox 40 Performance Elite 29er fork, of course. On this bike, it's the older model with the old sort of bridge. The new Fox 40 was already announced when I received the bike, but not when I ordered it. And I think on the current model, it still comes with this fork, although I may be wrong. Just check the spec sheet on Fox's or on Scott's website. What I really like about this fork is the integrated fender. It may sound a little weird to talk about a really nice expensive fork on an expensive bike and just mention the fender, but it's a nice little difference. And on dry days, it helps keep the dust out of your eyes, keep the rocks out of your eyes, and prevent some rocks from hitting the down tube. And on wet days, it keeps most of the water out of your eyes. But as you can see, it's a fairly short one. It's mostly handy against little rocks and dust, not so much with water. And now we are talking about stuff the bike comes with. This is a little blank you get for that fender. A really weird thing I noticed is the seat post clamp. It's like a quick release seat post clamp, which on a downhill bike makes no sense because all you're going to do is catch your pants on this and open up the seat while you're actually riding. The bike does come with a lot of adjustments though. So one of the adjustments you get are headset cups. So you get different stack height headset cups, and you also get these so you can adjust the headset angle. I still have mine in the stock default headset angle because it feels fine to me personally. Again, I don't have a lot of experience riding downhill, so maybe these will make a world of difference, but I actually like the way the bike feels. As you can see, plenty of adjustment on the height of your handlebars. Overall, the cockpit is basic. It's just basic aluminium bits, but it's good enough, it works. The bike comes with these really nice synchros grips. However, when you crash on a grip like this, it gets absolutely destroyed. Luckily, during my trip where I crashed a lot, I got these grips. They're by 77 Designs and they're also absolutely great. What's not so great though are the brakes. These are fairly standard, although beefy, non-series, or they're not SLX, Diore, XT, Saint, whatever, or Z. So these are 4-pot brakes, but they're fairly, I wouldn't say bad, but you definitely notice it's a budget brake. Again, mine is scratched up because I tend to crash a lot, but the brakes, yeah, not a big fan. To talk a little bit more about the brakes, it's a fairly standard 4-pot. It's easy to find 203mm rotors for, easy to find pads for, but the bite point is all over the place on these. They heat up pretty quickly, and overall they're just not the best brakes. But then I do get spoiled sometimes with these test bikes having amazing brakes. So maybe I'm just used to too much luxury. I have the bike upside down right now. This is a rubber down tube protector, which also goes all the way to the bottom bracket. However, being glued on, it's hard to replace, and I got this massive hole in it on my first ride. And I don't know how I can easily get this off without all the glue residue. It's a bit of a nightmare. I wish it was a bolt-on. And then there is also a little bash guard. Awesome when you're just smashing through rock gardens with very little skill like myself. It's a plastic one, or a composite one as they'll want me to talk about it, but it's a plastic one. Little adjustment here depending on what size chainring you use, so you can go slightly smaller, you can go a lot bigger. That's really awesome. And now we have the bike upside down anyway, we might as well talk about the bottom bracket. So it's a SRAM dub bottom bracket on this one. And it's not threaded, it's a press fit bottom bracket. I kind of wish on a downhill bike it would be a threaded one. It's maybe not as stiff, it's maybe not as light or as easy to manufacture, but it would be nicer to easily swap out bottom brackets and maybe cranks if you end up bending a crank and switching to a different brand. So again, I would prefer a threaded one, even though there's really, in theory, nothing wrong with press fits when it's done right. It's just that you don't exactly have a press with you all the time. If you're wondering what tires the bike comes with, it's Outtakes in 2.5 wide, and it's a DH casing with their 3C max grip. Tubeless ready, of course, although you don't get tubeless ready wheels. Well, ready as in everything's ready for tubeless when you actually put some tape on yourself. So these are Synchros MD30s, but actually they're just Alex rims. And the rims are, how do I put this, bad. They're really, really soft. So it feels like the rims are made of butter. You dent them super easily, especially on the rear, because the spring, as I said, is a little bit too soft and I bottom out, and then you really smash your rim into a root or a rock. I also flexed the rim quite a bit when doing really hard berms. So the rims are probably my least favorite thing about the entire bike. Now, what's maybe worse than the rims themselves are the spokes. It feels like, well, if the rims were made out of butter, the spokes are like molten cheese. These things stretch like crazy. And not only do they stretch, they actually come loose while you're riding. So what I often had while riding was that a spoke would completely vibrate itself out because the spoke obviously moves around as the wheel gets bent. Then of course this thing is no longer under tension, the nipple starts vibrating, and on a few occasions I actually lost the nipple inside the rim. And then of course you have to take the tire off and take the rim tape off, find that nipple, put it back in correctly. So when you buy this bike, buy one of these, a 3.4mm spokey, and after half a day of riding, or maybe after each run at first, check your spoke tension. Make sure the spokes are on correctly, make sure they're tight. That's the only real advice I can give with this bike. It's the only thing I don't like about this bike, to be honest, is the wheels and the way the spokes come loose all the time. The hubs, they're cheap, but the hubs are okay. And having a flexible or compliant rear rim is really not that bad. But what does suck is how quickly the spokes get loose on this bike. And so the last thing to really talk about is the drivetrain. It has a SRAM GX 7-speed. As you can see, it's a fairly standard wheel, so it's not one of those special E13 wheels where the spoke angle is a lot wider and comes straight up to the 7-speed. This is one of those standard SRAM 7-speed cassettes that fits on pretty much any free hub that you buy it for. So there's some room for improvement, again, making the hub wider so it fits up nicely, but then from a compatibility standpoint and fitting a road bike cassette on here, for example, that's easy to do. And then of course, SRAM GX, it's SRAM GX. What can I say about it? It's SRAM GX, it's okay, I guess. So that was it for the technical side of this video. I forgot to mention the brake model number. They're Shimano MT520s for those wondering. If you have any other specific questions about technicalities on this bike, exact parts or diameters of a seat post, for example, that you can't easily find on the Scott website, let me know in the comments below. I read all of them. I'll try to reply to every single one that isn't a obviously really stupid question that has already been answered in this video. Now, technical stuff, all lovely to talk about, but what is the bike actually like to ride? Well, I come from first a cross-country background and then moved into enduro riding. And going from a bike with 150mm travel to this has really been, I wouldn't say life-changing, but it's definitely a massive change. The bike is really stiff when riding, but because you have such an amazing amount of travel, the suspension is super soft and plush. And while I hate to use the term confidence inspiring, I did stuff on day one with this bike that I wouldn't consider doing on my other bike. Even though I love my Spectral and I ride it a lot, some drops and jumps and the speeds I'm going on this bike I wouldn't consider doing on the Spectral. And I think that's really where downhill bikes come into play. And not just am I doing bigger stuff because the bike is more capable and it's therefore giving me a full sense of security and a full sense of skill, I was then later also able to transfer those skills to my enduro riding. So it's really strange. I don't know if it's relevant at all to this video, but my first enduro race this year, I finished 3 minutes and 43 seconds behind the winner. I then rode this bike in bike parks for 2 weeks in total, and I finished 1 minute and 43 seconds behind the winner. Same winner, I think, or at least the same top 3. So that kind of says a lot on how getting a better bike or a more capable bike can kind of change your mental state on how you approach certain things. And for me, having a downhill bike that's faster than my enduro bike also made me faster on my enduro bike. The way the bike feels, really good, really well balanced, and overall I really love riding it. The only problem with downhill bikes, of course, is you need to go down a hill, and here in Flanders we don't have any. So I do have to travel a couple of hours at least to ride this bike, which kind of sucks, but you know, it's what you get a downhill bike for. It's to do the bigger stuff. Am I happy with my purchase? Of course I am. It's the most expensive bike I ever owned, and technically my employer owns it and I'm just leasing it. But it's definitely, I guess, great value. It's a very specific tool. And I do definitely think about bikes as tools, not as movable art or functional art as some people. For me, it is just a tool. If I scratch it, I don't care if I scratch it. It just has to function correctly so that I can ride it as hard as I possibly dare. So I definitely think the value is there if you are specifically looking for it. Kind of think about this as having a normal road car, which is great at doing everything. You can take it to the shops. You can do a track day with it. That would be your trail bike. This is an all-out race car, but bike, if that makes any sense. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Again, I read all of them and I'll reply to most of them that make any sense whatsoever. But anyway, if you want to see more content about this bike or about me riding it, even though, you know, with COVID and lockdowns and winter, it may be a little bit hard, but if you have any desire for more content about the downhill bike, let me know in the comments down below. For now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers! Well, isn't that just lovely? I finished filming and I found a bolt with stripped treads. Now I gotta go through all my bikes, try and figure out where this thing came out of.